Welcome back to Tide Pod. It's just Jack and Tony again this week, but it's the big one, Tony. You've been on site in Pasadena all week, doing as much preview deep dives as you can, running around all the various media availabilities, parades, other random whatnots to get ready for the Rose Bowl, Alabama, Michigan. We're gonna do our predictions to finish the show, but there's a bunch to dive into, just that we've learned, from these media availabilities here in the last week. But first of all, for you, how's Pasadena been? How's the coverage been going? Being on site this week, changed to
Yeah,
Pacific time.
yeah, the Pacific time part is still getting to me, that I'm 2 hours behind y'all in, Central Time, so that's still, when I wake up, I have text messages that are, like, from people at, 9 or 10, and it's, like, 8 or, maybe even, like, 6 or 7 in the morning for me. So that's kinda getting used to. Um, I don't know if I'm gonna get used to that even by the end of this trip, but, I'm enjoying California so far. It's nice, the weather's pretty nice over here. It's my first time in LA, so that's also fun. We've gotten to go out to practice a couple times. We went out to Disneyland earlier. Got to see Nick Saban in a little Disney parade. That was pretty fun. We also got to go like kind of like back behind the scenes of Disney World, or just sorry, Disneyland. We didn't really get to ride any rides or anything as a media, but it was kind of neat to see kind of like the back alleyways of everything and kind of stuff that you wouldn't get to see from the park. And then as far as just talking with the team, I mean, look, everybody seems pretty locked in. I think there's confidence on both sides, not just Alabama, but Michigan. But I think that, things are going pretty well with them. And, there's been a lot of drama, whether it be through sign stealing or, the team can't use their iPads. And there's a lot of like, I guess behind the scenes, uh, maybe non-game centric news going on, but I think for the most part, people are pretty locked in, and I think everyone's just ready for this Rose Bowl.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to go to that because you guys have been able to see practice and take videos of practice and stuff. And I'll get to some of the younger guys in a second because I know some of the 2024 class members have been able to participate. But what's been your take from what you've seen? I mean, I know it's hard to get a read on a 11-on-0 practice or just going through drills, but
Yeah.
you can even
So
dive into health too if you want with some of these guys looking healthy. I know we
sure,
did an update on Jace too.
sure. So in practice, I don't think we get to see too much. Alabama's been very guarded. They already are very guarded. What we get to see in practice is not. It's really hard to tell, how the team looks. You're not getting any looks, and Alabama's actually. I don't know if this will be addressed, but they actually kicked the media out a little bit earlier
Oh
than they
wow.
were supposed to kick them out. During practice, but it's kind of par for the course for Alabama. We were not really used to seeing practice. I don't even think if we would have gotten the extra whatever 5 minutes, I don't know how much more of we would have seen if I'd be able to report. A lot of attention on some of the people that aren't going to play. You've got Julian Sayin. I think people are just wanting first look on him. Caleb Odom's another guy I saw out there. Got a close look because they were working the tight ends right where I was at. Those guys are going to be good in time. You also got LT Overton serving on the special team or on the scout team. Jack, it's kind of a weird thing. Not many teams are going to have a scout team as good as Alabama's. They've got Tyler Buckner, who started an SEC game, serving as the scout team quarterback, and then LT Overton, a 5-star kid from Texas A&M, serving as the edge rusher on the scout team defense. So I mean, like Alabama's got a lot of scout team help for this one, and it just shows the depth of this roster. But as far as what we've have been able to see, like Jace McClellan looks to be fine. I think that's the big thing you can judge from a practice like that. All signs point to go towards him being able to start, and that the foot looks fine. Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was dealing with a concussion, I mean, he's been practicing since they opened up bowl prep, so that's not an issue as well. He's cleared protocol, so I think Alabama will be at full strength, and from what we've seen, they look pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny you said about the scout team. Just, that has been the main focus, it seems like, is all the videos I see on Twitter are just, hey, here's Julian saying again when he's just not playing in the game. And, perhaps like you kind of introed with, that's sort of an example of just how a lot of the stuff coming from or coming getting fed to the media and to the public haven't really been about this game. Of course, they're playing Michigan, a team that's had so much controversy all year. So I guess we can just touch on it before we dive into more of what we're expecting on on Monday. But there's been a lot of stuff with the sign stealing. I know you guys just had a presser today on Sunday here, where that got brought up in front of both Saban and Harbaugh. A little bit of awkwardness to end there. Stuff's come out with Alabama they're not looking at their tablets outside of practice to watch game film, all sorts of stuff. What's your kind of read on that whole situation, and how I guess Alabama's players and coaches have reacted?
Yeah, so I think that there's obviously precautions, and Alabama's not watching practice footage on their iPads. They're keeping that all central to avoid any kind of leaking or hacking of practice footage. It's something that Michigan, to be fair, said that they're doing the same thing as well. So it's not just Alabama having to do it. I think that's. I don't want to say it's a lot to do about nothing, because I mean that's a serious accusation and something that it does change the game prep, but I don't think that that's affecting Alabama in a lot of ways. I talked with a few Alabama players. I think JC Latham was the one that said, like, if anything, it just makes him look at practice more intently. Some of these guys, they'll watch 15 minutes of clips here and then 15 minutes of clips there. I think with now, it's since you're watching it as a team, you're really dialed in, and you don't have the luxury of going back to watch tape, so you're watching it a lot more intently, and kind of making sure that you soak up as much during the time that you're able to watch it as possible. But I don't think that that's going to affect Alabama. I don't think that they're used to minor changes like that. Obviously, just being in California is a minor change, so there's things that go on with bowl prep that I think just because it's a little bit different doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect the team too much. And it doesn't seem like it's been a distraction. And I really don't think there's an overall huge concern from Alabama about the sign stealing. It's it's just kind of almost more, but it's such a sexy headline, and there's such like media intrigue from a big picture standpoint. But I think from this game particularly, I don't think it's if Michigan was stealing signs, if there was I mean, they probably but I guess if that is an issue, it's probably not as much an issue in this game as it was an issue earlier on in the season. I think with the awareness around it, I think it'd be very hard for Michigan to kind of pull something off if they were trying to, kudos to Michigan if with all the attention that they've given, if they were able to pull off some kind of cheating thing, that would be really sly, because now there's a million eyeballs on everything that they're doing. So, we'll just have to see. I just don't think that has any effect on the game, but it has made for plenty of discussion this week for sure.
Yeah, it'd be right under the nose, as the old saying goes,
There you
if
go. Yeah.
anything like that was happening. And I think Saban said as much. And I do want to get your read on this, because this just happened. We're recording Sunday afternoon, and you had the presser with Saban and Harbaugh, together in the same room. And you, I think, kind of put everyone there perfectly in your article. But can you just like dive into the read of the awkwardness of that, question popping up, and then Saban having to kind of give his take on that in front of Harbaugh?
Yeah, so I mean, it was an 8:30 press conference after a week of talking about the same stuff between Harbaugh and Saban. So you're getting just the same questions of like, how does your team match up? How much progress has Jalen Milroe shown? How has your team responded through adversity? All the same stuff that both coaches have been answering again and again and again. And then the last question of the press conference was about the sign stealing, and it was just like it was the question everyone was kind of waiting for, but it just the proximity towards, that question, and, them shaking hands and having Saban, answer a question that was, kind of directed about Jim Harbaugh, 5 feet away from Jim Harbaugh. Meanwhile, Jim Harbaugh's like staring down the reporter. It's just kind of, it's just kind of funny. It definitely woke up at what I thought was a very sleepy press conference. So good to get a little life out of it. But once again, like you're so close to the game that I just don't think that that's really an issue anymore. I think both of those guys throughout that whole entire press conference just wanted to get it over with and make those final preparations, and really just I think everybody wants it to be Monday. Everybody wants it to be the game, and to discuss the on the field stuff, because this could be a really good matchup as well.
Yeah, I mean, and let's not beat around the bush anymore. I mean, you diving into the matchup. I know you've gotten a chance to talk to Michigan's players and coaching staff as well, and I'll lead this into the preview of the game. Some of the comments I saw. I know there was that video of Michigan's players reacting to getting Alabama, and a lot of Alabama fans, I'm sure, kind of took that as like, oh, they look nervous. And even, I mean, the general college football fandom took it as such. Obviously, Michigan is not going to say that. They didn't say as much when I know you and other reporters asked about that. It seems to me the way I kind of read into it is like they're using that as motivation. They're like, why aren't teams giving us more respect as they're the number one seed, coming into this playoff, whether you agree with that or not. What's been your read on talking to those guys and how ready they are?
It's been really funny because I feel like both sides feel like they're the underdog. I
Yeah.
mean, I think Michigan feels like they're getting overlooked because they're the number one seed, and then you've got Alabama, and they're trying to kind of spin it as technically, I guess Alabama's, Michigan's still favored. I haven't checked the latest betting lines, but I think Michigan's still favored by like a point. And so, you've got Alabama saying, oh, we're out to prove ourselves, and we want to prove that we belong in the playoff. And obviously, Alabama's faced some criticism, maybe less so after that Florida State Georgia game, but there was some criticism of whether or not they should have made the playoff. I think they kind of hold the chip on their shoulder there. But then you've got Michigan, saying, "Hey, we're the number one guy. We're the number one team." A few of their players were like, "Hey, I'm tired of talking about being the underdog because we shouldn't be the underdog." So it's kind of a weird situation where both teams feel like they're being slighted, and probably neither of them are being slighted. I think most people expect this to be a good matchup. So, but I think it's one of those things that I think both coaches want their teams to feel slighted, and so they're kind of fueling that. Um, I think from watching it though, I think both sides are very confident and very locked in. I don't think there's a mental advantage either way. Sometimes you go into these and you can tell that like one team is just totally either scared, not scared, but like they know they're going to be overmatched, or they're a little bit concerned. I remember a Peach Bowl back in, I think, like 2016. You talked to the Washington players, and they were confident in themselves. But I think there was a general, like, thought among that team that, like, well, we're just going to give it our best shot against Alabama. But that this is Alabama. Michigan's definitely not like that. Michigan, knows it can go punch for punch with Alabama. And I think, obviously, Alabama knows it can go punch for punch with Michigan. So it'll be interesting to see. The one thing I will say is, there hasn't really been an answer of who has Michigan gone up against that's going to be kind of similar to Jalen Milroe. And we've talked to some of their players, and they brought up players like one of the players that they brought up as similar to Jalen Milroe is Talia Tungavailoa, and those guys are not similar at all. Not to take anything from Talia's game, he's just not Jalen Milroe. He's not as fast. He's not really. He's definitely not as big. He's not the same style of runner. So, the fact that that name was brought up as a comparison towards Jalen Milroe just kind of emphasizes the fact that Michigan really hasn't faced something like this. So, that's something to kind of watch in this game. And that's been talked about a lot is Michigan, they're never going to say that they're tired of talking about Jalen Milroe, but I'm sure that those players, they've been asked so much about how they match up against him. I'm sure that there's a little bit of chip on their shoulder, and they're going to want something to prove going against Alabama and going against Milroe, and kind of proving that they can stop him.
Yeah, I mean, and let's talk about Milroe for a second because you mentioned a chip on his shoulder. I mean, another kind of viral moment so far from this week was Jalen Milroe being asked about changing positions. He calling out Bill O'Brien, of course, when he was at Alabama, saying, he told me to change positions. Who got the last laugh? So this is a guy who, just as Michigan might be, kind of putting a target on his back and wanting to take him out of the game and show they can slow down a quarterback like him. I mean, he's embraced. I don't want to necessarily say like a villain arc. That's way overstating it. But he's clearly coming in with saying, I'm proved that I've become the guy, and I'm the guy that can lead this team to a national championship. It seems like some of those comments at least reflect that.
Yeah, I think, there's a huge chip on Jalen Milroe's shoulder, and I think he's done, he's kind of shown it a lot more on this trip than he has before. He's kind of opened up a little bit more on this trip, and obviously there's more media access towards him, so he's going to be able to do that. But yeah, I think, he faced a lot of doubt early on, maybe even some in the program, and so I think, that's kind of the comments from Bill O'Brien telling him that he should switch positions. I think, that's really fueled him. And I think there's two ways to take that. You can get dejected and you can start doubting yourself, or if you're Jalen Milroe, you're confident in yourself and you're just hell bent on proving people wrong. And that's what Jalen did. And, he's really trusted, I hate to get all, Sabanese right here, but he's really trusted the process and gotten better and really done everything you need to do to improve on the field. And I think he's playing like a guy that's doing all the things right and has something to prove. And you're definitely starting to see that. I think, his big thing at first was proving that, he could make good decisions and that, he could be a passer, and he's really done that. And he hasn't, thrown for 300 yards, but he's made some skilled passes and some passes that, people said that he couldn't make. And then as far as decision making, he's only had one turnover since I think since the beginning of November. So, when you look at that, he's really just been a different quarterback. And he's, it's funny, they send out they just sent out all the Lank shirts, but he really has, let all naysayers know, like he says, like he advertises it. It's the reason why I say it's funny though is they sent all those shirts to the NFL, and I saw Mac Wilson had one, and I'd just be interested to see if it'd be a really sly move for Jalen Milroe to maybe send one Bill O'Brien's way as well over in New England, and maybe get his size and send one over there, because he really has let Bill O'Brien know if that's what Bill O'Brien said. And I'd like to actually get Bill O'Brien's take on that. But yeah, I think he's proved a lot of doubters wrong, and I think that this playoff for Jalen Milroe is a continuation of that. I think he wants to just prove, okay, now I can do it on a big stage and in the biggest of stages, and I can be that title winning quarterback that everyone kind of wrote off earlier in the season, and I can lead Alabama and join his name into the list of great Alabama quarterbacks that won a title. I mean, you look at Bryce Young, was a great Alabama quarterback, didn't come away with the title. It just shows how hard it is to do. If Jalen can, achieve that, he kind of joins an extra group of Crimson Tide legends.
Yeah, definitely. And he's going to get a chance to prove something against, what's a phenomenal Michigan defense. So let's talk about some of the ins and outs of this game, and get your thoughts. I mean, this is a Michigan team. They give up 9.5 points per game. That leads the country. They give up 240 yards of offense a game. That's second in the country. I mean, this is a team that's shut out a couple teams this year. You can get into the competition thing. I think you made a good point there of they haven't faced a team like Alabama. So how have you looked at kind of Alabama's offense measuring up against what is still an elite Michigan defense?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough. I mean, you saw Alabama do it against Georgia, so I think that's where the confidence is coming from. If Alabama could move the ball at least enough to win a game against Georgia, I think you're dealing with a similar defense. And I think there's also, like I think you were saying, like the competition. We don't necessarily know how good this Michigan defense is because they really haven't faced, maybe other than Ohio State. And we really don't know how elite Ohio State's offense is, but they haven't really faced an elite offense. And I think Alabama's offense, when it's clicking, can be elite. So I think this will definitely be Michigan's biggest test. I think what Alabama needs to do against this team is just really try to find ways to spread them out, because I think Michigan's got a really strong front seven. You can't just line up and try to overpower them. They're going to be able to hold their own against Alabama. They're a tough unit. I think if you get guys like, Kendrick Law, Isaiah Bond on those short passes to the outside, maybe do some kind of creative plays where Jalen Milroe rolls out with those guys, or maybe some jet sweeps, just to kind of move and kind of soften the belly of this Michigan defense, so that you can kind of establish somewhat of a running game. And if you're able to do that, then I think that just opens up another facet where you're able to kind of hit them deep. And so it's all about kind of like working your way into different like plateaus, right? So you got to soften up. It's almost like setting up your punches in a boxing match. You've got to hit him with a few jabs so that you could lay that haymaker. And I think that's kind of what Alabama is going to have to do against Michigan. They're going to have to kind of set things up, and it's going to really come down to the offensive scheme that Tommy Rees is going to put together. And he's a guy that's talked about Jalen Milroe's improvement and some of the other players' improvement. But I think Tommy Reese has just been uh, vastly improved, and a huge part of Alabama's kind of resurgence this season was his ability to kind of see what he had and get a good feel of his offense, and then really play to his strengths. And I think he got so much criticism early, and I don't necessarily think he's gotten the praise he deserves compared to that criticism. I think Tommy Reese has just done a really good job of adapting, seeing what he had with Jalen Milroe, seeing what he had with the offensive line, looking at his strengths and saying, okay, this is how we're going to start attacking teams. And it's really worked.
Yeah. I want to get your take on Michigan's offense too, but in terms of breaking this defense down, I mean, who's one guy, maybe other than Milroe, one of these other playmakers, whether whether it's Justice Haynes coming back or Jason McClellan coming back, excuse me, or one of these receivers, who's one guy on Alabama's offense you think could be another X factor, and then maybe a guy on whether it's that front seven or on Michigan's defense that you think could be, kind of the key disruptor on Monday.
I think you're gonna have to make some plays downfield. So that's been Jermaine Burton and Isaiah Bond. I mean, those are kind of easy picks for people who are going to be those X factors. But I think that those guys are going to be key in this game, just because if it's going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust, that's exactly what Michigan wants. I think
Mhm.
for Alabama to win this game, they're going to have to get into their big play. I'm not saying Alabama is going to be totally reliant on the big play like they were earlier in the season, but that's a big part of what makes them so deadly. And you're going to have those huge chunk plays against Michigan. So I think that those two players, Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton, have been the best at creating those. And I think you're going to probably need a few big moments from them. I don't think they need to run wild. It's not totally reliant, but I think you're going to need some of those 30-yard plays that kind of really hit Michigan in the mouth, and then you got to capitalize off of it from there.
Yeah. Is there a guy on Michigan's defense that you maybe talk to or like?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just an overall solid unit. I think that's the thing about it, and you can kind of look on both defenses where you could pick out a ton of guys from each side. It's really going to be, you talk about, you'll ask Jim Harbaugh about how they're going to stop Jalen Milroe, and the number one thing he says, just it's going to take an 11-man effort. And I think that's
Mhm.
really the case for all of Michigan. They've just got such a solid group. I don't think it's like one guy where you're just like, you're going to circle him and just be, it's not like there's like one Aiden Hutchinson out there that's just like, okay, well, yeah, we just definitely got to stop him. There's so many facets to it. They're strong in the secondary. They're strong in the front seven. It's just going to be, I think a lot of it's going to come down to scheming. A lot of it's going to come down to both sides being able to kind of use their strengths at the right time to their advantage. And so, it's almost the coordinators, if anything. It's going to be a matchup. It's going to be, I could see it being kind of a chess game.
Yeah, I almost said play chess, not checkers when you said that first thing about, you're setting up your haymakers. How confident are you in terms of, obviously Alabama's defense has also been a phenomenal unit, just as Michigan's has. And this is a Michigan offense. I mean, they have an 1,000-yard rusher in Blake Corum, a guy with a ton of experience. JJ McCarthy clearly has his weapon in Roman Wilson as out at wide receiver. But I think that's been the biggest question mark is how this Michigan defense is going to, or offense is going to be able to burn what has been, especially in the secondary, a great year for Alabama. Are you pretty confident in that unit making the necessary stops to keep itself in front?
I am, and I don't, I just like, I look at a guy like, I think JJ McCarthy's a good quarterback and I think he can make a lot of plays, but I think he's almost like a kind of a little bit of a athletic game manager type quarterback. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to be that elite quarterback that sometimes it takes to beat Alabama. Now we've seen, lesser, and I don't even know if I want to call JJ McCarthy a lesser quarterback. I don't think I'm giving him the credit he necessarily deserves, but we've seen teams nickel and dime Alabama in the past, especially with mobile quarterbacks, and that's something that JJ McCarthy can do. But I think he's going to have to really make some plays with his legs, and it, if you want to give a good like optimistic look at Michigan, you would look at that Auburn game and look how well Auburn ran the ball against Alabama and some of the looks that they gave Alabama that Alabama struggled with. I think Michigan's good at creating those, and if I was a trying to sell the Michigan offense against the Alabama defense, that's what I would turn to. It's like, look how much they struggled against Auburn, and can Michigan kind of replicate that? Because if you look at it, I think Michigan's got a better team than Auburn, obviously. But when you look at kind of that style and that they play with a mobile quarterback, a really sound running game, a good running back, I think it kind of mirrors what Auburn did, which I mean could be a source of optimism because I think Alabama really struggled against that. But if Alabama can play and control things the way it did against Georgia, then I don't think that they have the playmakers, the Brock Bauer type players to beat Alabama, you know, enough times I think it's not going to be a shootout, but I do think Alabama is going to get its points against Michigan's defense. And I just don't know if Michigan's offense is going to be able to generate enough
to
uh,
match.
to match. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's really what it's going to come down to. I like I like if you're going to say Alabama's offense is a strength and Michigan's defense is a strength, well, I like Alabama's defense more than I like Michigan's offense. That's
Yeah.
kind of the way I would go for it.
Yeah, I like that take. I think you're right. That's sort of the game I look back at with Auburn is if Michigan can have that same success, it could get scary with like a Blake Corum back there. But I agree. I don't think I think Alabama's going to get theirs on offense, and yeah, I don't know if Michigan's going to quite have enough. This might be a dumb question, or maybe it's a little nitty gritty, but with a receiver, when you only really have Wilson, when you have a guy who is more mobile, not as much of like a big playmaker like McCarthy is. And Alabama's secondary is so good. Is there going to be more opportunities, for them defensively to maybe use their defensive backs as like, bring them in on blitz packages, do more things with, maybe stopping that run games, whether it's getting DBs in the backfield to disrupt if they don't have to hone in on like the elite receivers like they maybe did against Georgia?
Maybe, but like I said, like Michigan has a lot of trick looks. So if they draw
Mhm.
you in, you've got to be kind of aware for that. And look, Auburn was able to pull off some big plays against Alabama as well. So you just got to be kind of yes, ideally, I think that's probably how Alabama wins is, they are able to kind of force JJ McCarthy into, long passing situations where Michigan's not going to necessarily be as successful in, and you can kind of maybe take some chances, blitz a guy like, Malachi Moore, somebody like that. That's a really, or Caleb Downs or somebody that where you can get some extra pressure and really affect the quarterback. That's kind of what you would try to do. But you can't just get overconfident and say like, oh, Michigan's not going to make any plays with their receivers. You got Roman Wilson, you've got Lovejoy the tight end, or Loveland, sorry, the tight end, and they've got players that can make plays, and McCarthy is a player that can make plays. So yeah, I think that is probably why I would pick Alabama. But once again, it's not necessarily you definitely got to give Michigan their credit as well because they are a strong side. And we talked about earlier playing with a chip on your shoulder. There's a lot of players on this Michigan offense that are playing with a chip on their shoulder for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a chess match. It's going to be a chess match. These coaches have had a lot more time to prepare for each other than they usually get in an average week. Any final just like takeaways from stuff either on the Michigan or Bama side, before we do the good old predictions and maybe look foolish or look really smart?
Yeah, I'm just trying to buy time to get my to like settle in on my prediction, but I think I've got it. I'm just so ready for this game. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about just seeing, the Rose Bowl is such a fun atmosphere. It's such a like scenic, you talk about all the changes in college football and the future of it and is it still college football? But you look at at least from an aesthetic standpoint, you look at a venue like the Rose Bowl and you're just like, that's the tradition. That's like why we love college football. I know that sounds really corny, but I'm just excited to see that and just kind of like take part in that tradition. And hopefully it's a good matchup. And it can be one of these classic games.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let you do a prediction on this first before so you can have more time to settle in. Other semifinal, let's touch on that briefly. Texas Washington, a team, of course, Alabama played in Texas, great offense in Washington. Since we won't record until after both of these games, who do you think who will be possibly Alabama's opponent in the national championship game if the Crimson Tide get there?
Yeah, I wanna be trendy and pick Washington because I don't think they're getting enough credit. And I think that, like, it's kind of being somewhat overlooked how much of a matchup advantage they'll have against the Texas secondary that struggled against the pass. And Washington has the best passing offense, and so that matchup, if they can exploit that, it could really make things interesting. But from an overall talent standpoint and overall team aspect, Texas is also going to get theirs against Washington's defense, and so there's so many weapons on that Texas team, and I honestly feel like if I was looking at the two best teams in the playoffs, and this is going to tip my hand for the next prediction, I would go Alabama and Texas. So it's kind of weird because those are the two one-loss teams against the two undefeated teams. But yes, I'll pick Texas. I don't think they're going to blow out Washington. I think unlike the Alabama Michigan game, I think that one really could develop into a shootout. And it'll be a really fun one to watch. I'm hoping I get all my work done as quickly as possible, so I tune in a little bit to that one and see how it plays out. But yeah, that's going to be definitely an interesting one. I'll take Texas. I don't have a score for that one, but I'll take
Yeah.
Texas in it, and probably whatever the over is, I'll take that.
I have Washington. As the hours tick by, I get more or less and less confident in that pick, but that's what I've kind of bought into. Once this matchup got revealed, so I'm going to stick with the Huskies. I think they're a great they're a great story. I love what Michael Penix, how he's been able to come in there and lead them to an undefeated season. But Texas has a lot of talent. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it goes either way. And I agree. I hope it's just a shootout and just a really entertaining game. Okay, you mentioned you have Alabama in the national championship, Tony. What is your score prediction here for Monday's contest? We'll have an article with all of the Tide Illustrated staffers' predictions, but what are you going for on Monday?
Yeah, I've said from the start that I just think Alabama. I think because Michigan hasn't played anybody, and because Alabama, comes in so hot that I was going to pick Alabama by double-digit points. I've said it's going to be a good matchup, and it will, I think, at times. But I think ultimately Alabama is going to be able to pull away. I don't think Michigan's offense, like we said, is going to have the ability to just kind of attack Alabama with those big plays. It does have. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I don't think it's going to happen. And so I'm going 27-14. I think that Michigan will get a couple touchdowns. It might be early. And I think you're going to see Alabama kind of, maybe it's in the third quarter. Maybe once Alabama goes up by 2 scores, it's going to be over. And I think it's going to be, it might not necessarily run away with the game, but I don't think Michigan's going to. I think there's going to be a point early, midway through the third, or early in the fourth quarter, where just Alabama has pulled away to a point where you just know that Michigan's offense is not going to move the ball that much with the time remaining against Alabama's defense. And I think that that's kind of be the way that this one ends. So as far as an exciting or like a down to the wire game, I'm predicting Texas and Washington to be a little bit closer, more fast paced towards the end of it. But I think Michigan hangs around early, and I think Alabama pulls away early fourth, late third.
Yeah, okay, I have the exact same thing. I've been saying since this got, picked, I think Alabama's going to win this game by 2 touchdowns. I have them winning 28-14 as my prediction. I've said I think it'll be a one-score game going into the fourth, and yeah, it'll be a methodical first drive for Alabama. They'll get that second score, and it'll be with 8 minutes left, and that just won't be enough time for the Wolverines. It's very specific. So again, it could go wrong there, but
Yeah, and I could see, Michigan handling Alabama's running game early, and then maybe they haven't played a team like this, on a consistent basis. So maybe, you talk about methodically, they could get worn down in the fourth quarter. And maybe you see
right.
a big drive, just a big game killing drive in the fourth quarter. I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we'll see what happens. Again, maybe you can't write Michigan off. Their players are certainly not writing them off, especially after that video came out. But we both have Alabama. We'll see how it plays out on Monday. If you're in Pasadena, I was also traveling this weekend. Tony, I was in the airport. There was some Crimson Tide. I flew out of Dallas. There were some Crimson Tide fans going to Burbank and Los Angeles, so they're getting over there for the game. Actually, that's a good question. Have you seen more Michigan or Alabama people walking around?
I feel like I've seen more Michigan people, but I think the blue and maize, navy and maize, whatever, is a lot. It
Shows out
stands out
more.
a little bit more
Yeah.
than crimson, and maybe I'm just used to seeing crimson. But if I had to like give you a like, who do I think I've seen more of? I do think I've seen more Michigan. We'll see. Alabama fans just come out of the woodwork during the game, so we'll see what it's actually like, in Pasadena or
In the stadium.
during the kickoff. But yeah, slight edge to Michigan so far from what I've seen this week.
It's more of a vacation for them. It's cold up. It's colder up there.
That's
They
true
get
as
the
well.
excuse to
I'd
go
want
to
to spend more
California.
time in California if I was up there in Michigan. So
Yeah,
maybe that's the
exactly.
case.
Well, we'll see who's showing out more on the field. We're both picking Alabama. That'll wrap it up for this episode. We'll come back next week and we'll have a recap of the game. And if it all goes the way we've predicted it to, we'll have a preview as well for the national championship. Should Alabama make it there? If you're at the game, enjoy it. If you're watching at home, enjoy it. And subscribe to Tide Illustrated for all the best coverage. Like we said, Tony's the boots on the ground, repping the brand down there. So he'll have all the coverage on game day. And until then, everyone enjoy.